Unaware the housewife he abandoned was the silent partner behind his $1 billion deal. Husband left her after years of marriage to follow his rich boss. What she did next ruined them completely. He didn't just leave quietly. He dragged a suitcase across the floor of a small, modest home, looked his wife in the eyes after years of marriage, and told her she was never really part of his success, while his rich boss waited for him outside in a sleek company car. That evening, Laura Harper, a 37-year-old housewife with tired eyes and ink-stained fingers, stood by the dining table as her husband, Eric, rehearsed a cold speech he'd clearly practiced. "I've evolved," he said. "You're too comfortable. I need someone who matches my drive." He meant Vivian, his powerful CEO, the woman in the car checking her watch, ready to drive him toward the life he believed he deserved more than his wife. He thought he was trading a small life for a bigger one. He thought the woman folding his shirts and cooking in their simple kitchen knew nothing about billion-dollar deals. He thought the trust in her father's name was just family security, not something that could touch him. What Eric didn't know was this: the quiet woman he just abandoned wasn't just his housewife. She was the unseen mind behind his first investments, the silent signature buried inside the contracts that made his company worth a fortune. On the same night he loaded his suitcase into Vivian's car, an urgent email landed in Laura's inbox asking for beneficiary approval on a $1 billion deal Eric thought he controlled alone. This is not just a story about a man who left his wife for his rich boss. It's about what happens when the invisible woman he walked away from turns out to be the one person with the legal power to stop everything. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Laura's side of the story disappear behind his version. When you click that button, you stand with every quiet partner who was never seen, never credited, but always essential. Please subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The room was silent until a single notebook slammed shut. Laura Harper, 37 years old and 12 years into a marriage she thought would last forever, pressed her hand against the cover as if holding something dangerous inside. The sound echoed through the small home office, shaking the air with an invisible weight. From the outside, she looked like a regular housewife in comfortable clothes, hair tied back, face soft and quiet. But inside this modest room, surrounded by shelves of journals and folders, she held the unseen blueprint of the life she had helped her husband build. 12 years of marriage, 12 years of standing behind a man who didn't really know who he married. Hours from now, he would drag a suitcase across their floor and tell her she was never really part of his success. But in this moment, she was still the woman who believed that standing beside him had meant something. Laura wasn't just loyal, she was trained. Long before she became Eric Harper's wife, she was the daughter of Louis Harper, a man respected in financial circles for his discipline and sharp understanding of law and business. He had raised her alone after her mother passed away, and he didn't raise her to be weak or blind. From the age of 8, Laura learned what most adults never touched: how trust worked, how contracts protected people, how deals could be shaped quietly from the background, and how names on paper sometimes mattered more than faces in public. When her father died, he didn't leave her a big house or flashy wealth. He left her a trust named L. Harper Family Trust, a set of carefully structured documents, and one sentence that became a rule for her life: control your name, control your power. Stay silent until silence no longer protects you. It wasn't much to anyone else, but to her it was everything. Her fingers moved over the piles of journals on her desk now, journals full of her handwriting, early strategies, product ideas, market notes, budget plans she built late at night while Eric slept, meeting summaries from calls no one knew she took. 12 years of marriage were written quietly between those lines. Every page held proof that she didn't just support her husband, she helped build his career. Eric Harper, now 39, charismatic and ambitious, was the face everyone saw. The man in suits, the one giving speeches, the one in photos with executives. To most people, he was the self-made success story. He believed that too. He believed he was the one who had climbed and hustled and earned everything. He believed his wife was just there at home, cooking, cleaning, smiling. He never truly understood what she did at this desk. Laura reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder that carried more power than Eric had ever realized. L. Harper Family Trust. The paper inside was still crisp, clean, dangerous. She opened it and read the same lines she had seen years ago. Owner, grantor. Lewis Harper. Beneficiary, L. Harper approval rights, required for all investment contracts above a set value. Special clause. Beneficiary holds veto power for major transactions involving trust-owned shares. The trust had become a quiet investor when Eric's company was nothing but an idea and a prototype. The legal agreements that followed gave the trust, her trust, protective rights over any large deal involving those shares. Eric always assumed this trust belonged only to her late father. He never asked for details. He never cared how the company was funded in the beginning. He just knew that after years of failure, suddenly there was money for his prototype. He never wondered why. Laura closed her eyes for a moment and touched the framed photo of her father on the bookshelf. He was smiling in it, his hand resting gently on her shoulder when she was younger. A memory pulled her back, sitting beside him at a worn kitchen table, papers spread out, his voice low but firm. People will look at you and see just a girl or just a wife one day, he had said, but the name on the paper, the signature on the line, that's where real power sits. Never forget that, Laura. Stay silent if you must, until silence becomes dangerous. Back in the present, she opened her eyes and stared at the trust document. 12 years of marriage, 12 years of building, and suddenly something felt wrong, loose, off balance. She exhaled slowly and closed the folder. Her hand lingered on the cover, but her eyes didn't soften. They dimmed with something heavier, an awareness she didn't fully understand yet. Somewhere deeper in the house, a phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. Eric's phone. He had rushed out earlier, saying he couldn't be late for a meeting with Vivian. He never left his phone behind. Not once in 12 years. Laura glanced toward the sound, a quiet chill sliding through her. Why would he leave without it? She whispered. A question with an answer she wasn't ready to hear yet. His forgotten phone will become the first visible crack in their 12-year marriage. The memory didn't drift in gently. It crashed into Laura's mind like someone had ripped open an old door. She could still hear Eric's panicked voice from years ago, echoing through their tiny living room. I can't do this, Laura. I'm drowning. This idea will die before it even starts. He was younger then, about 30, thin from stress, pacing back and forth with a stack of unpaid bills in his hands. His hair was messy, his confidence broken, his dreams burning out faster than he could speak them. He was a man desperate to succeed, desperate to prove himself, terrified of failure. Laura stood in the doorway of her home office in the present, staring at Eric's forgotten phone on the counter, and that old memory came roaring back with painful clarity. Extreme beginning intensity achieved. Now we slow down. She walked back to her desk, opened her journals again, and breathed through the sting in her chest. Back then, when Eric's ideas kept failing, he didn't need someone brilliant. He needed someone stable, someone who believed in him more than he believed in himself. And Laura had been that person 8 years earlier. Eric sat at the kitchen table, defeated, hands in his hair. I pitched this idea to 5 investors, and they all said no, he muttered. They think I'm inexperienced. Maybe they're right. That was the moment Laura had made a decision that would shape the rest of their lives. She excused herself quietly, walked to her childhood desk, and opened the one thing her father had left her, the L. Harper Family Trust. Inside was a modest inheritance, not life-changing, but enough. Enough to build a prototype, enough to buy software, enough to give Eric one more chance. Her father's voice echoed in her memory as she stared at the trust documents. Control your name. Control your power. Stay silent until silence no longer protects you. Laura knew what she had to do. She contacted her father's old lawyer, Mr. Dalton, a calm older man with silver-framed glasses and a steady presence. When he first met Eric, he recognized the man's charm, but also saw his lack of financial discipline. It wasn't a flaw. It was simply who Eric was, passionate, creative, but reckless. One afternoon, Mr. Dalton asked them to come in to finalize documents for the funding of Eric's first prototype. But Eric didn't show up. He was curled in bed, exhausted, drained from rejection, and terrified of signing anything that involved legal or financial responsibility. "Laura, can you go alone?" he had asked, eyes tired. "I can't think straight, and all that paperwork stuff confuses me anyway." She kissed his forehead and promised, "I'll take care of it." At the lawyer's office, Mr. Dalton studied her carefully before explaining something important. "Eric already has several loans and debts tied to his name. If we place this seed money and the ownership structure directly under him, his creditors could swallow everything if anything goes wrong. But if we structure it through your family trust, the trust can own the initial shares and still support his company." Laura blinked, confused. "You mean the trust becomes the shareholder?" "Yes," he nodded gently. "We'll set Harper Dynamics up so that the L. Harper Family Trust holds the protective stake. You'll give Eric operational control of the business, but the trust keeps veto power over major deals. Since the trust lists only L. Harper, most people will assume it's still tied to your father's estate. That protects him and you." It was logical, it was safe, it was quiet. She signed on the line labeled simply, "Beneficiary L. Harper." Eric signed nothing, not a single page, because he wasn't present, because he didn't want to handle the boring stuff, because he trusted her so completely he never questioned what she did behind the scenes. And Laura never used her full name. Back in the present, she whispered to herself, "You never knew, because you never wanted to know." More memories surfaced. Eric holding the first prototype in disbelief. You got the funding?" Laura smiled. "The trust helped." Eric laughed and hugged her tightly, completely misunderstanding. "That's amazing. Your dad really looked out for us, huh? Thank God that trust wasn't complicated. I can't imagine dealing with legal stuff." He had no idea that she was the trust's living power. Then the anchor, the line that proved everything. Flashback, Eric laughing while flipping through old drafts he thought were final. "Thanks for handling the financial mumbo-jumbo, babe. I'm clueless with that stuff." He wasn't joking. He meant it. He never reviewed the new documents. He never asked why his name wasn't listed on the trust's ownership side. He never checked why only L. Harper appeared on shareholder records. He simply believed it was her father. Ignorance wrapped in trust. Blindness wrapped in love, at least back then. Laura exhaled shakily, still staring at Eric's phone on the counter. Then she noticed something, a message notification glowing on the screen. "Dinner tonight, 7 p.m., same place. Vivian, Eric's boss." And with that single initial, another web of truth began to unravel. The presence of Vivian changes everything, and Laura begins to notice a shift she can no longer ignore. The sound hit her like a slap. A loud burst of laughter erupted from the hallway. Eric's laughter, sharp, proud, full of confidence Laura had never heard from him before. It wasn't joy, it wasn't excitement, it was the laughter of a man tasting the sweetness of victory and taking full credit for it. Laura froze beside her desk. A few minutes earlier, she'd heard the front door open and close quickly. No knock, just keys turning. Eric had come back for his forgotten phone, grabbed it from the kitchen counter, and taken a call before she could even step out of her office. Now he strutted into the living room, phone in hand, speaking loudly to someone on the line. "Yeah, I told the team the idea came to me last night," he bragged. "They loved it. Vivian said it was genius material." He paused, listening, smiling wider. "Of course I can present the pitch. I wrote the whole thing." Laura's breath caught. He wrote it? The pitch he was bragging about. She had written the entire structure of it 2 nights ago while he slept. Extreme intensity established. Now the slowing reflection begins. She slipped quietly into her home office, the door half open as Eric continued talking. Over the years, their company, Harper Dynamics, had grown from a desperate idea to a real business. But what no one outside their home truly knew was that countless late nights, countless calculations, and countless decisions had been made by Laura behind the scenes. She shaped Eric's presentations. She refined his language and softened his tone. She wrote emails he sent to investors, drafts typed by her, sent by him. She even joined early negotiation calls as Ms. Harper from the Family Trust. careful with her words so no one tied that calm voice directly to Eric's wife at home. People knew there was a Harper trust in the background. They assumed it was old family money, guided by an office somewhere, not by the woman folding Eric's shirts in a modest house. Because everyone believed Eric built the company with his natural leadership. And Laura had allowed that at first, not out of weakness, but out of love, out of loyalty, out of the belief that marriage was teamwork, not credit-keeping. 2 years earlier, Laura sat at the dining table rewriting one of Eric's proposals. She improved the numbers, clarified the strategy, and added market insights he hadn't considered. When they submitted it, investors were impressed. They called him a rising visionary. Laura smiled and celebrated with him. She didn't need credit, not then. But as the company grew, something else grew alongside it, Eric's ego. She heard him laughing again. Vivian said I have natural instincts, he boasted. She thinks I can lead an entire division one day. Vivian. Laura had only met the woman twice, but that was enough to understand who she was. Vivian Hayes, wealthy, confident, polished, the CEO of the major partner firm that had taken equity in Harper Dynamics. The woman who had once shaken Laura's hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The woman who often praised Eric in front of crowds but looked at Laura like she was invisible. Laura stepped into the living room, her voice gentle. Eric, did you get my notes on the pitch slides? I think slide 7 needs... I already fixed it, he snapped quickly, waving her off. I've got it, Laura. This is my field, not yours. The shift was subtle, but sharp. His tone, his posture, his confidence, suddenly too high, too inflated. Laura swallowed her words. Inside, a quiet pressure pushed against her ribs. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was confusion. Where had this version of Eric come from? Her phone buzzed. A message from Marianne, her closest friend for over 15 years. Saw the pitch online. Your touch is all over it. You basically built this company. Laura stared at the message for several seconds before replying only, let him shine. It's his dream. But her fingers trembled, because for the first time, the words didn't feel true. Later that night, as Eric prepared for bed, he tossed his tie onto the dresser and said casually, Vivian wants me to attend the next investor retreat. She thinks I'm ready for bigger things. Laura looked up from her journal, her voice quiet. We built those early strategies together, remember? Maybe. Laura, please, he cut in, sighing with annoyance. You're amazing at supporting me, but this level of business is complicated. Her heart cracked, but she stayed silent. He didn't know the truth. He didn't understand her role. He couldn't see past his own reflection. When Eric finally fell asleep, Laura walked back to her office. She opened a journal. Then another. Then another. Every page was filled with contributions no one knew belonged to her. She whispered to herself, how did my support become his superiority? She sat in the dim light, staring at the trust folder. Her father's words echoed softly in her mind. Stay silent until silence no longer protects you. Laura's thumb brushed the trust seal, and her eyes shifted, darkening slightly with realization. Then, the sound of a new message came from Eric's phone, charging on the dresser. A name appeared on the screen. Vivian. Next step tomorrow. Don't tell her yet. Laura's breath hitched. The night exploded with noise. A car door slammed outside. Hard, sharp, aggressive. Laura jumped slightly, her pen slipping from her fingers. She moved to the window just in time to see Eric stepping out of a sleek black company car and Vivian Hayes stepping out right behind him. Vivian didn't walk. She glided. Tall, polished, mid-40s, with a confidence that entered a room before she did. She was the CEO of the investment firm that held a major stake in Harper Dynamics, a woman known for her cold precision and expensive taste. Her presence never felt accidental. Laura froze as she watched her husband laugh at something Vivian whispered, his entire posture pulled toward her, like metal to a magnet. Extreme tension established. Eric walked her to the car again, nodding eagerly, desperate for approval. Vivian touched his arm lightly, a gesture too intimate to ignore, then finally left. When Eric entered the house, he was smiling widely, a smile Laura hadn't seen directed at her in months. "Big day?" she asked softly. He shrugged, trying to act casual, but his tone was inflated, proud. "She thinks I have potential. Real potential. Vivian says most people my age never get this far." Laura nodded slowly, her chest tightening. Vivian Hayes. The woman whose message read, "Next step tomorrow. Don't tell her yet." Laura watched Eric remove his coat, noticing something strange. His usual simple shirts were gone. He wore fitted dress shirts now, expensive ones. His hair was styled differently. The tie he wore wasn't one she had purchased. Small signs, small shifts, but each one felt like a thread tugging from the life they built. Eric began talking excitedly about the exclusive strategy sessions Vivian invited him to. "She says I have leadership energy," he added proudly. "Not everyone sees that." Laura swallowed gently. "I've always seen that." He didn't hear the pain in her voice, or maybe he didn't want to. The next day, another shift appeared. Eric left early, too early, and refused breakfast, saying Vivian wanted him prepared for a high-level meeting. He didn't let Laura help with his slides. He didn't ask her opinion. He didn't even show her his presentation markers, something he used to do out of habit. Laura stood in the hallway watching him tie his shoes. For the first time, he didn't double-check if his collar was crooked. He didn't lean in for her reassurance. He didn't need her, or rather, he believed he didn't. Hours passed. Laura stayed in her home office, trying to focus on her journals, but her mind kept drifting back. When Eric returned, he carried a new cologne scent, a new briefcase, a new ego. "How was it?" she asked. He loosened his tie, smiling. "Amazing. Vivian thinks I'm one of the most promising guys in the company." The way he said it stung. Later that week, Laura joined Eric at a corporate dinner, Vivian's idea. Vivian greeted everyone warmly, then turned to Laura with a smile that felt thin and mechanical. "So you're the wife," Vivian said, voice dripping with polite dismissal. "Eric speaks highly of you." "Thank you," Laura replied kindly. Vivian's eyes flicked over her outfit. Simple, elegant, not expensive. "I imagine corporate work must not be your thing," she said casually. "Wives usually find it stressful." Laura forced a smile. "I manage just fine." Vivian leaned in, lowering her voice. "It's best you let Eric carry the business load. This world is too intense for people who aren't trained." Laura felt heat rise under her skin. Trained. She wanted to laugh. She was trained by her father from the age of 8, but she stayed silent. Throughout dinner, Vivian praised Eric endlessly. "Your instincts are sharp. You think like a leader. Not many people have your talent." And each compliment pushed him farther away from Laura. Laura felt the shift in the air, subtle but dangerous. When Vivian spoke to the group, Laura noticed something else. Vivian never mentioned the early investments, never credited the trust, never acknowledged the silent partner structure. Vivian's role became clear. She was grooming Eric, molding him, inflating him, slowly convincing him he built everything alone. The more Vivian praised him, the more Eric believed he created the company himself. His ego grew, his gratitude shrank, his awareness disappeared. After dessert, Vivian leaned close to Eric, speaking softly but not softly enough. "You don't owe anyone your success, Eric. Especially not a housewife." Laura's heart froze. Eric hesitated, then nodded. He nodded. That small motion felt louder than any scream. When they reached home, Eric walked ahead without waiting for her, his shoulders squared with new confidence. Laura stayed by the car a moment, trembling. She looked up at their home, once theirs, now suddenly unfamiliar. Inside, Eric's phone buzzed again. A message flashed across the screen. "Vivian, tomorrow's test will show if you're ready for the next level." Laura's voice broke into a whisper. "What test?" The front door slammed so hard the picture frames on the wall rattled. 12 years of marriage shook with it. Laura flinched. Eric had never slammed the door before. Not in all the years since they'd stood in front of friends and promised to build a life together. They had survived debt, failure, stress. But tonight his anger felt different. It felt final. He stormed into the living room, chest rising and falling, tie loosened, eyes burning with something she had never seen directed at her before. Cold decision. His steps were sharp, controlled, like a man walking toward a stage, not his wife. Behind him by the entryway, a medium-sized suitcase leaned against the wall. It wasn't the overnight bag he used for short trips. It was the one they used when they moved into this house. Without sitting, he spoke in that low, practiced tone. "We need to talk." Those words had never scared her in 12 years. Tonight they did. She closed her journal slowly and looked up at him. "All right. What's wrong, Eric?" He drew in a deep breath, as if this moment was about his courage, not their life. "I've evolved, Laura." The words didn't match the man she knew. They sounded like a line from one of Vivian's leadership seminars. He continued, pacing a little, his voice too calm, too prepared. "I'm stepping into a new phase. I've worked too hard to stay small. I need someone who matches my drive, who understands the world I'm in now." The world he was in now, not the world they had survived together. 12 years of marriage suddenly felt like a job he was resigning from. "You've always been supportive," he added as if reading off a script. "And I appreciate that. But you're too comfortable, too settled." Laura swallowed. "Comfortable? Eric, I've stood beside you since you had nothing. I watched you fail, restart, fall apart. I took night calls, fixed your pitches, fought through every setback." He cut her off. "You helped at home, and I'm grateful for that. But I need more than a supportive wife." Her heart squeezed. He hesitated, then dropped the line that cut everything in half. "You've supported me, yes, but you were never really part of my success, not my career." 12 years erased in one sentence. He didn't know. He truly didn't know. He didn't know her trust funded his first break. He didn't know her hands shaped his strategies. He didn't know her name, hidden as Elle Harper, sat above his biggest deals. Not because the truth wasn't there, but because he never wanted to see it. "Eric," she whispered, calm but shaking, "if I was never part of your career, then what have I been standing in for all these years?" He looked away, jaw tight. "A phase I've outgrown." The words landed like a quiet explosion. Outside, headlights washed through the curtain fabric. Laura glanced past him and saw the outline of a sleek car waiting by the curb. Vivian's driver. Vivian's car. Eric followed her gaze for a second, then looked back at her as if trying to hurry through an uncomfortable speech. He moved to the hallway, grabbed the suitcase and rolled it toward the door. The sound of the wheels scraping the floor felt like someone dragging the last pieces of their life out the door. He walked toward the exit, then turned back, a final edge in his eyes. "Just don't embarrass yourself thinking you're entitled to anything." She didn't scream. She didn't chase him. Her face didn't harden. It emptied. He stepped outside. Through the window, Laura saw him open the car door. Vivian's silhouette leaned forward from the back seat, giving him a small, satisfied nod, as if he had passed the test she'd set. The door shut. 12 years of marriage ended in one quiet click. Inside the house, Laura stood still for a long moment. Then, with very slow steps, she walked to her desk, opened her laptop, and saw the email waiting for her. "Urgent contract amendment request. Requires beneficiary approval." The subject line referenced the upcoming partnership, a $1 billion deal involving the very shares her trust controlled. Her 12 years were not as powerless as he believed. The 12 years he dismissed will become the 12 years that destroy everything he tried to steal. The email notification exploded through the silent house like a fire alarm. Laura spun toward her laptop, heart pounding. The subject line glared at her. "Urgent contract amendment request. Requires beneficiary approval." The words hit her like a jolt of electricity. Beneficiary, approval, urgent. Her hands shook as she opened the file. A document loaded, pages and pages of legal terms stacked neatly, too neatly. At the top, in bold letters, proposed amendment, shift voting rights to primary executive, Eric Harper. Associated transaction value, $1,000. Projected. Laura's breath froze. Eric and Vivian weren't just closing a deal. They were trying to take full control of the company built on her trust money. Extreme intensity established. Now the slow, heavy reflection begins. She sat down carefully, as if afraid the floor would collapse under her. Her eyes scanned the document again, searching for the loophole, the trap, the signature line. Near the bottom, she found what she needed. Approval required, beneficiary, L. Harper Family Trust. It was the same clause Mr. Dalton had once insisted on, the one designed to protect the trust shares in any major transaction. For years, notifications like this had come through quietly. Minor approvals, routine filings, adjustments she signed because they didn't threaten control or ethics. But this one was different. This wasn't routine. This was a $1 billion deal and a shift in voting rights. A silence settled around her, but it was no longer the silence of heartbreak. It was the silence before a storm. She opened her drawer and pulled out the old trust binder she hadn't touched in years. The cover was faded, the edges worn, but the contents inside were sharp, powerful. She turned page after page with trembling fingers. Financial statements from the first prototype she secretly funded, emails she wrote under the trust's assistant name, investment confirmations signed by beneficiary, L. Harper early contract drafts where Eric promised to work hard to make Laura proud. It was all there. Her fingerprints, everywhere, hidden, silent, undeniable. Her throat tightened as she remembered a younger Eric, sitting across from her at the kitchen table, thanking her for keeping track of boring things. He never realized what she was actually keeping track of. Flashback. She was in her father's lawyer's office 8 years ago. Mr. Dalton, her father's loyal attorney, sat with his hands folded. "Your trust is powerful, Laura," he had said in a calm, serious tone. "Powerful?" she asked. "How powerful?" He slid a paper toward her, one she still kept sealed in the binder. "Any deal above a certain value that involves trust-owned shares cannot move forward without the beneficiary's signature. You hold veto power. Never forget that." Veto power. She hadn't thought about that clause in years. Not really, not deeply. Back then, she never imagined using it. She trusted Eric. She believed in his dreams. She believed her silence was love, not weakness. Now, as her eyes followed the words on the amendment request, something inside her shifted, a quiet awakening. Laura stood and walked slowly around the room, the reality growing stronger with each step. "They think the trust belongs to my father," she whispered to herself. Her voice was soft but firm, like it was learning its own strength again. She placed her hand over the trust binder, the weight of the truth settling into her bones. "They don't know I'm the beneficiary." The transformation was subtle, but the change was real. Her heartbreak became clarity. Her confusion became direction. Her silence became a weapon, one she never intended to use but now could no longer ignore. She returned to her desk and stared at the amendment again. The deadline for approval blinked at the top. 48 hours. Vivian and Eric planned to push the deal through quickly. They expected no resistance. They expected the trust to be dormant, powerless, irrelevant. They expected Laura to still be the quiet wife in the background. But the documents told a different story. She was the one with authority. She was the silent partner. She was the final signature required for the deal. And she was the only one who could stop them. Her hand hovered over the binder, trembling not with fear, but with awakening power. The trust wasn't sleeping. She was. Now she opened her eyes. Just as she reached for her pen, another email appeared, this time from a private address she didn't recognize. No name, no subject beyond. "You need to see what they discussed today." Laura's breath caught. Someone out there knew what Eric and Vivian were planning, and for the first time, someone was sending the truth to her. Someone unexpectedly steps forward, and the truth they bring will change everything. The video started playing the moment she clicked the link. No play button, no pause, just instant movement. A grainy thumbnail expanded across the screen, and then sound filled the room. Eric's voice. "We just need the amendment pushed through." She won't question it. She never questions anything. Laura's heart slammed against her ribs. That one sentence, so casual, so dismissive, so blind, ripped through her. She slammed the laptop shut before the video could continue. Extreme intensity established. She stood completely still, breathing hard, one hand gripping the edge of the desk until her knuckles turned white. The betrayal had a voice now. It had proof. It had weight. But she didn't cry. Not anymore. Slow reflection begins. She opened the laptop again, not to replay the video, but to save it. Her fingers moved with new precision. She downloaded the file, copied it onto an external drive, and backed it up to a secure folder with a password only she knew. Then she pulled up every document tied to the company, to Eric's contracts, to Vivian's partnerships, to the trust. She spread them across her desk like puzzle pieces. Every investment, every meeting she signed for, every contract that required beneficiary, L. Harper approval, every deal Eric thought he could push past her. They all pointed to one clear truth. She had legal standing. She had authority. She had the right to challenge everything. But to win, to protect the company and herself, she needed more than documents. She needed a team. Her father used to say, "A strong mind is good. A strong team is unbreakable." So Laura wiped her tears, straightened her shoulders, and reached for her phone and called her father's old lawyer, Mr. Dalton. She called him first. The moment he heard her voice, he spoke with calm certainty. "I wondered when you'd need me again, Laura." She explained the amendment, Eric's departure, the $1 billion value, the anonymous video, Vivian's involvement. He listened without interruption. Then he said, "Bring every document you have. The trust was built for storms like this. We're not just signing or refusing, we're documenting a pattern." Mr. Dalton wasn't just a lawyer, he was the gatekeeper of her father's legacy. His role was clear: protect the trust, guide her legally, and ensure every action she took was airtight. A day later, at Mr. Dalton's suggestion, Laura met Ms. Ray. To anyone else, Ms. Ray looked warm and harmless. Mid-50s, glasses too big for her face, a quiet voice. But she was the kind of expert who could find hidden fraud inside a single receipt. When Laura showed her the amendment request and the projected $1 billion deal, Ms. Ray's eyebrows lowered. "They want to shift voting rights before closing a deal this large?" she said slowly. "Without disclosing trust control to all stakeholders? That's not just strange, that's dangerous." She tapped the file. "They either don't understand what they're doing or they're hiding something big." Her role: expose everything Vivian tried to bury. Ms. Ray had worked corporate cases before. She knew what they needed next. "There will be conversations they never put in writing," she told Laura. "You'll need someone who can find them." That's how Laura met Mateo. Tall, sharp-eyed, mid-40s, a man who once handled discreet corporate cases before going private. When Laura explained the situation, he nodded once. "People like Vivian always leave footprints," he said. "I'll find them." His role: uncover conversations, secret meetings, hidden agendas, anything exposing Eric and Vivian's intentions. Mateo traced the anonymous email to someone who had once worked under Vivian, an ex-assistant named Jenna Morris, early 20s, who had quietly resigned months earlier. Jenna arrived at Laura's house trembling, unsure if she should have come at all. "I'm sorry," she blurted, clutching her bag. "I shouldn't have recorded them. It wasn't allowed, but I couldn't watch what they were doing anymore." Laura spoke gently. "You're safe here. Thank you for sending that video." Jenna's shoulders relaxed a little. Once she began talking, the flood wouldn't stop. She revealed everything she saw. Contract drafts Vivian told her to adjust without telling the board internal memos where Vivian mentioned removing obstacles tied to the trust calendar entries for private dinners between Eric and Vivian that were later deleted financial data. Vivian ordered her to clean, moving risk off the books. She had kept copies of emails and files because something felt wrong. The anonymous video Laura saw was just one of several recordings Jenna had taken when meetings behind closed doors got too dark. Jenna's role: internal witness and documentation. Together they formed a circle around Laura. Not loud, not flashy, but strong. Quiet intensity. Days passed in a blur of scanning, sorting, investigating. Ms. Ray uncovered multiple financial anomalies, sums redirected to accounts tied to Vivian's shell entities. Mr. Dalton confirmed at least 3 contract breaches and conflict of interest violations. Jenna provided emails she had secretly saved, proof of Vivian's manipulation and Eric's awareness. Mateo retrieved audio clips from a restaurant where Eric met Vivian, clips showing they planned to override the trust completely. Piece after piece, the story unfolded. Vivian had been hiding risk and fraud for years. Eric had willingly concealed financial dangers. Together, they attempted to shift voting power to cover their actions and lock Laura out. The trust required beneficiary approval for deals of this size. Without Laura's signature, nothing could move forward legally. With her evidence, the board and regulators couldn't ignore her. Late one night, Mateo arrived at Laura's house with something in his hand, a black flash drive. "You should watch this when you're ready," he said quietly. "It's a cleaned, extended version of those recordings. There's more than what Jenna sent. This is the piece that ties everything together." Laura stared at it. Her hand trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what this drive might contain. Mateo added, lowering his voice, "If you decide to go public, or to the board, this is what they'll have to see." He left, closing the door behind him. Laura stood in the silent house, staring at the flash drive glowing faintly on the table. Her breath hitched. Whatever is on that flash drive will explode everything. Right in the middle of Eric and Vivian's biggest event, the screens exploded to life in a blinding burst of white light. Every shareholder in the room, hundreds of high-ranking investors, analysts, board members, executives, jerked their heads toward the stage. The room fell into sharp, electric silence, the kind that crackles in the air before something devastating happens. On stage, Vivian Hayes stood confidently beside Eric Harper, both dressed in their finest. They were ready to announce the finalization of the biggest deal the company had ever seen, a $1 billion partnership set to elevate Eric's career beyond anything he had ever imagined. Behind the scenes, the contract signing system was linked to the trust's approval mechanism. Earlier that morning, the legal department had received something they never expected, a formal veto notice from the L. Harper Family Trust, a beneficiary statement, and the flash drive Laura's team provided. But Eric and Vivian didn't know that yet. Extreme intensity established. As the event's presentation system synced with the live contract platform, a small status line in the corner of the main screen blinked from green to yellow to red. Vivian turned slightly, expecting the next slide. Terms, projections, investor returns. Instead, the screens froze. She tried to laugh it off. "Looks like we have a quick technical glitch. Give us 1 second." But the screens didn't return to normal. Instead, bold red words appeared across every display. "Contract halted. Beneficiary, veto activated." Gasps filled the room. Eric's face drained of color. What does that even mean?" The crowd erupted with murmurs. "Veto? Beneficiary? The trust intervened? Who has that power?" An alarm rang inside Eric's mind, but panic forced him to step forward, shouting over the noise. "Who activated this?" he demanded. "Who has authority over our partnership?" A voice answered from the side, steady, official, and cold. "I do, and the compliance team does." The company's chief compliance officer stepped forward, a middle-aged man in a dark suit with a folder in his hand and a calm expression. Eric stormed down from the stage. "Who are you to shut down my deal? This is my company's contract." The officer opened the folder. "Mr. Harper, this $1 billion transaction involves shares partially owned by the Kshuri L. Harper Family Trust. Under your own original agreements, any deal over a certain threshold requires the trust beneficiary's consent." Eric's lips parted. "The trust? You mean Laura's father's old trust? That thing was never involved in the business." The officer looked at him strangely. "No, sir, you're mistaken." Eric blinked. "What?" the officer repeated louder this time. "The trust belongs to the beneficiary, and the beneficiary is Mrs. Laura Harper." The room's silence shattered. It was like the ground disappeared beneath Eric's feet. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No sound came. My wife?" He shook his head violently. No. The trust was her father's. Her father handled. She can't." Vivian stepped forward quickly. "There must be a mistake. That trust was for family security. It has nothing to do with corporate affairs." The officer shook his head again. "The L. Harper Trust is the primary silent partner from the seed stage. All major deals are subject to the beneficiary's approval. We verified the trust records, the beneficiary's ID, and her notice of veto filed this morning with legal and the board. Every executive turned toward them, shocked. Eric's voice cracked. This is insane. Laura has nothing to do with this company. And then a new sound cut through the chaos. A single click. A video flashed onto the frozen screens. Reflection slows the tension, then twists. It was the video from the flash drive Mateo had given Laura. The cleaned, extended version of Jenna's recordings. Eric and Vivian sat at a candlelit table, leaning close. Vivian whispered, "If we get the amendment through, she'll lose any leverage she thinks she has. No more obstacles." Eric nodded eagerly. "Yeah, she barely understands what's happening anyway. Laura stays out of business. She always has." The audience gasped as the footage continued. Clip after clip, Eric and Vivian planning to override the trust, shift voting rights, and minimize disclosure. Vivian's voice, "We quietly move the power on paper, then push the deal through. By the time anyone notices, it'll be too late." Eric laughed. "Laura signs whatever we send. She trusts me." The whispers grew louder. "This is fraud. They tried to bypass the trust. Did they hide this from the board? This could kill the deal entirely." Eric lunged for the stage controls, desperate to turn it off. "Stop the video! Turn it off!" But the compliance officer stepped between him and the console. "Mr. Harper, do not touch that equipment. This material is under review as part of a formal investigation." Vivian's jaw clenched. "Who authorized this?" "The board," the officer replied, "after receiving the evidence from Mrs. Harper's legal team." Whispers became waves. Eric looked at Vivian with wide, panicked eyes. "What do we do?" Before she could answer, the compliance officer spoke again. "Mr. Harper, Ms. Hayes, until this matter is investigated, all contract negotiations are frozen. The company cannot proceed with the deal." Eric stumbled backward. His entire future, everything he built, everything he claimed, everything he believed was his, was slipping out of reach. And then, quietly, gently, the camera in the back of the room shifted. Someone had just walked in. A woman in a simple dress, hair tied back, eyes calm. Too calm for the moment. Laura, she didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence alone changed the temperature of the room. Eric whispered her name like a curse. "Laura!" She looked at him, not with anger, not with tears, but with knowledge and the strength of someone who finally sees the truth clearly. Before anyone could speak, a second notification appeared on the screens. "Beneficiary statement received. Pending legal review." It was the written summary Mr. Dalton had filed on her behalf, confirming her refusal to approve the deal and outlining the breaches. Laura's eyes shifted toward Eric. Her voice, barely a whisper, cut through the entire hall. "It's time everything came to light." Eric will try to beg, but Laura's legal power and her resolve will decide what comes next. Eric slammed his fist against the front door so hard the entire frame shook. "Laura, open the door! Please, Laura!" His voice cracked on the last word. He sounded nothing like the man who had walked out days earlier, with arrogance in his step and Vivian waiting in the car. Now he was breathless, desperate, and terrified. The $1 billion deal had been frozen. The video had spread internally. The board had announced a formal inquiry. 3 days had passed since the event. In those 3 days, Laura's legal team had filed motions, divorce papers, trust enforcement actions, requests to suspend Eric from influence pending investigation. Laura opened the door slowly. She didn't look angry. She didn't look wounded. She looked settled. A woman who finally understood the truth and had stopped trying to fix someone who didn't want to be better. The intensity begins to shift. Eric stumbled forward as if seeing her physically hurt him. "I didn't know," he blurted. "Laura, I swear, I didn't know you were behind everything. I thought the trust was your father's. I didn't know you had any control." Laura stepped back, her expression calm, unreadable. "You didn't know," she repeated quietly. "No, you didn't." He rushed closer. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Vivian, she said, she made me believe." Laura lifted a hand. He fell silent immediately. You never asked me, Eric, she said softly. Not once. You never listened to me. You never cared how the company survived long enough to become your dream. Her voice wasn't cutting. It was factual, like reading a report. That made it hurt more. Eric shook his head violently. Laura, please, I can fix this. We can fix this. I didn't mean for things to go this far. His hands trembled. His whole body trembled. Reflection deepens. Laura watched him for a long moment as if studying a stranger. You left, she finally said. You left to chase someone who told you what you wanted to hear. And now that everything is collapsing, you come back because you need something. I need you, he whispered, tears forming. Please. But Laura didn't soften. She didn't step closer. She simply moved aside. Behind her stood a man in a dark suit holding a stack of documents. Eric blinked. Who is he? The man stepped forward professionally. Mr. Harper. Yes, Eric said, voice thinning. The man extended the envelope. You've been served. The words hit harder than any shout could have. Eric staggered back a step. Served? Served what? Laura answered gently. Divorce. His knees nearly gave out. The server continued reading. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Asset division. Beneficiary confirmation. And permanent removal of Mr. Harper from all decision-making roles within the Harper Trust and affiliated companies, pending investigation and court approval. Eric's mouth opened in horror. No, Laura, no, you can't. He reached out for her wrist. She pulled her hand away before he touched her. I already did, she replied. Cold, precise, poetic. His entire world crumbled in 2 sentences. But the company, my job, my future. Laura's voice remained steady. The trust is ending your involvement in the business. Legally, you can't sit on decisions tied to trust-owned shares. You hid risk. You attempted to manipulate contracts. You tried to erase the silent partner you never acknowledged. I didn't know it was you. And that was your failure, she said quietly. Not mine. He broke. Right there. In her doorway, Eric sank to his knees, shoulders shaking, face collapsing in humiliation and disbelief. Vivian had promised him a kingdom. Now he had nothing. His phone rang. Eric grabbed it immediately, hope flickering. Maybe she could salvage something, help him think, offer a plan. The screen flashed. Vivian Hayes. He answered quickly. Vivian, thank God. Listen, something went terribly wrong. The deal is frozen, Laura. Vivian's voice cut in, sharp and cold. We're ruined. Eric froze. What? You and I are being investigated. The board is distancing from both of us. Investors are pulling out. My position is already under review. Vivian, wait, listen. I need you. Don't contact me again. Her voice hardened like steel. We never had a relationship. You were a useful employee until you became a liability. The call disconnected. Eric stared at his phone as if it had burned him. Vivian had abandoned him just as fast as she had pulled him in. His last illusion shattered. Slowly, he lifted his eyes to Laura, standing silent and composed at the doorway. He whispered, voice completely broken, What happens now? Laura studied him, this man she once loved, this man who never saw her. Her answer was soft and final. Now you face the consequences you created. She closed the door gently, not slamming it, not in anger, but in closure. As the latch clicked, Laura walked deeper into the house. On her desk flashed a new email notification. Court hearing scheduled. Trust enforcement and executive removal motion set. Vivian Hayes added to the inquiry. She breathed in slowly. Tomorrow would be louder. The courtroom becomes the final battlefield, and Laura's power will be undeniable. The gavel slammed so hard the entire courtroom jumped. All motions approved, the judge declared. Mr. Eric Harper and Ms. Vivian Hayes are formally removed from executive influence over trust-controlled assets and any related company decisions, pending further investigation. The L. Harper Trust retains full authority over its shares and voting rights. The words cracked through the air like lightning. Eric's shoulders collapsed. Vivian's face hardened, drained of color. Every camera in the courtroom flashed, capturing the final moment of their downfall. They were not in a criminal trial yet. This was a civil and corporate hearing. But the consequences were real. Power suspended, reputations shattered, futures uncertain. All eyes drifted next to Laura. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She simply breathed, calm and steady, as if her heart had finally found its rhythm again. Extreme intensity begins to slow. The evidence had spoken for her. The trust documents Mr. Dalton had protected, the financial analysis Miss Ray prepared, the recordings Jenna and Mateo exposed, the paper trail linking Vivian's manipulations and Eric's complicity. Laura hadn't shouted. She hadn't begged. She had let the truth stand on its own feet. As the courtroom emptied, board members from the company approached her, one by one. They were respectful now, almost reverent. People who once overlooked her now recognized the power she had held all along. The chairman stepped forward, a silver-haired man with careful eyes. "Mrs. Harper," he said gently, "we would be honored if you'd consider stepping into a leadership role. The company could use someone with your integrity guiding its future." Laura listened quietly, her gaze drifting to the folded trust documents in her hands. Her father's handwriting on the top page made her chest ache, not with grief anymore, but with gratitude. She closed the folder slowly. "Thank you," she said softly, "but I'm not looking for power. I only wanted the truth to matter again." The chairman nodded respectfully. "If you ever change your mind, the door's open." Laura gave a gentle smile and walked past him without looking back. Reflection deepens. Outside the courthouse, the sky was warm and open. People hurried by, unaware of the storm she had survived, unaware of the quiet war she had won with patience instead of rage. She walked to a small bench near a row of trees and sat down. The wind brushed her hair, soft and steady. She opened the trust folder one last time. The first page read, "Beneficiary L. Harper." Her finger traced the letters. Her father's voice drifted from memory. "Control your name. Control your power. And when you choose to speak, let the world listen." She let out a slow, deep breath and closed the folder completely. This time she did not hesitate. This time the silence was hers, chosen, not forced. She stood holding the folder gently and walked toward her car. Each step felt lighter. Each step felt earned. At the edge of the walkway, sunlight broke through the branches and washed over her face. Laura paused, letting the warmth settle across her skin. She wasn't the woman he left behind. She wasn't the silent partner in the shadows. Not anymore. Final narration settled softly through the scene. He built his empire on her silence, and she ended it with her truth. Laura smiled faintly, turned toward the open road and stepped forward. Some stories end quietly, but their echoes last forever.